Welcome to the Window Wisdom Podcast, your guide to replacement windows and more. Hi, I'm Ted Kirk, your host, and this is episode 3. Today we're going to talk about window styles. And actually, I had to re-record this podcast because the last one we recorded was so boring and got a little bit too technical. So thank you to our producer, Rebecca Scott, for bringing that out. So we'll try to make this one a little bit more interesting and go through less terms since we don't have illustrations to show. So first of all, let's start out with some terminology so you can understand exactly what we're talking about when we get into the styles. So the first term that you really need to be familiar with is called the frame or the main frame. So this is the outer part of the window, what gets mounted into your opening. They're all different sizes. You can listen back to the previous episode where we talked about the types of materials used. So these frames are going to be different sizes. And the next term that we should be familiar with is called the sash. Now, the sash usually goes inside the frame, and a lot of times this is the operable part of the window that goes actually around the glass. And then the last terminology, to keep it simple, is just going to be the light. And we're actually saying L-I-T-E, not L-I-G-H-T. So the light is actually how the window's divided up. This is the glass portion. So when you talk about the window lights, these are generally divided by two different types of methods. There's more than that, but generally two different types in replacement windows. And the first one is called grills between glass, or GBG. Now, these grills, there's also interchangeable terms, not to get too confusing here, but grills, grids, muttons. But basically, these are what divides it into the little squares or rectangles in your windows. So grids between the glass are exactly what they sound like. These are sandwiched between the two pieces of glass. There's some advantages and some disadvantages to this. Obviously, they're not going to give you the true divided look since they are in between the glass and there's a little bit of reflectiveness to the glass. But these are easy to clean. So it's almost like wiping off a table. You don't have to clean each individual pane. They are a little less expensive than the other types of grids that we'll talk about, which are called SDLs, or simulated divided lights. And these are usually bonded on the interior and exterior parts of the glass. And we like it when they use a shadow bar, which is an interior grill at the same time. So this truly gives you the look and feel of a historical divided light wood window. There are many patterns that are available, and they're all just based on your personal preference. And keep in mind, when you do the grids or the grills or the buttons, you can break them up in terms of by the elevation of your home. So for example, a lot of folks will put the grids on the front of their house, but they'll leave them off the back. Maybe they have a view they don't want to obstruct. Maybe they're trying to save a little bit of money. Many different reasons, but a lot of times we see that taking place in the replacement industry. And even new construction homes, you'll notice that sometimes they'll have grids on the front of the home, but not on the back. So that, again, that's a personal preference. So now let's get into some of the styles, and we'll keep it basic, but probably one of the most prevalent windows that we see installed across the United States is called a double hung window. And this is basically a window that, for the most part, is divided in half, and the bottom and the top portion of the window operates. So it basically operates up and down vertically in the opening. If you were to take this same window and make the top part of the window fixed, this would be what we refer to as a single hung. So I said, yes, these normally come in a 50-50 split, but there are many cases where the top portion or sash is actually larger than the bottom sash, or the bottom sash is actually larger than the top sash. So in that first scenario where you have a larger top sash, this is typically referred to as an oriel window. And if you reverse that and the bottom portion is larger than the top sash, this is typically referred to as a cottage window. Moving on from the vertical sliding windows, the double hung and the single hung, If you were to flip them over to their side, not exactly, but just try to envision that. We have what we refer to as slider windows, and these usually come in a 2-section or 3-section configuration. And instead of operating up and down, these are going to operate side to side. So a horizontal slider is what they're also called. So think about it similar to a sliding door, but much smaller for a window opening. So typically, if you have a very large opening where the width is wider than the height, we have a saying in the window industry, sometimes we say when the width is wider, then you go with a slider. Not always the case, but sometimes that tends to work in an area where maybe you're taking out 2 windows and you want to go back with 1. So there's different scenarios that may be a good option for you if you have a more modern style home rather than a traditional home. The next window that we'll talk about, and actually one of my personal favorites, is called a casement window. You may have heard these referred to as casement or crank windows. These windows are really nice when you want to enhance a view. They also seal up tighter than most any other window, so they're extremely energy efficient. But let's say you have a nice landscape backyard, pool or bird feeder, something that you really don't want a window divided in half to obstruct your view, but you still want to be able to open it. A casement window will allow you to do that, and when it's actually closed, it'll just look like a fixed window with the exception of having a lock on the side and a crank handle. I guess the disadvantage to this window would be that the screen is on the inside, and since it does crank out, you'll have to determine if there's anything that may impede the opening space there for this window. Along the same family of a casement window is called an awning window. Instead of cranking out to the right or the left side, an awning window will actually crank up. So if you think about an awning going over a window or door, an awning window kind of opens up the same way, so it has that awning shape to it. These are nice windows, particularly when the width is a little bit wider as well. These windows can maybe be open when it's raining. Just like the casement window, they will have a screen on the interior. So a lot of different applications. Basements, they can be paired with different windows that are fixed. So again, they're all a personal preference on what type of window style that you want to go with, but those are just a few. Next, we'll kind of move into some of the shaped windows. We have what we call a circle top window. These are also referred to as half round windows, which if you took a circle and divided it in half, that's exactly what you would get. A lot of times these windows are paired with other windows. Sometimes you'll find them standing alone in an opening. So when you do have a small window that is above another window, this is typically what we refer to as transoms. In the same respect, when you have small windows that are paired on each side of the window, these are typically referred to as side lights. Again, you have that LITE word that we mentioned earlier. And if you were to take a circle top window and make it extend down to where it has straight legs that keep going, this is actually called a circle top with extended legs, also referred to as a spring line window. Now, a lot of folks in our industry confuse this with what we call a Palladian style window, which it's not actually totally incorrect, but the Palladian style window, named after a 15th century Italian architect, is a configuration of a circle top with extended legs, and most of the time it would have 2 side lights on each side or maybe 2 rectangular windows. There are all kinds of shapes when it comes to windows. You can have triangle shape, circles, octagons. If you think about the shape of your eyebrow on your face, there's a lot of eyebrow windows out there. And there's some other specialty windows as well. For example, bay windows and bow windows. A bay window is typically a 3-window configuration with a fixed window in the middle, which actually reminds me, we really didn't talk about the fixed windows. There's a lot of windows that do not open, and these can be side lights or transoms, or they can just be extra large windows. And a lot of times these are referred to as picture windows. So a lot of the bay windows will have a picture window with two windows flanking each side. They can be double hung or they can be casement styles, but these, again, protrude from the exterior of the house. Bow windows are along the same lines, but typically with a bow window, you'll have four or more of the windows, usually the same style, a lot of times the same size for the bow windows. Again, these will protrude from the exterior of the home. If you are changing your windows, it's good to be aware of some of the building codes. So we make sure that we establish egress for those bedrooms that we talked about. There are a lot of areas that require tempered safety glass, and that means that the glass is a lot harder to break, and maybe when it breaks, it shatters into small, itty-bitty fragments. And with those, there's certain areas that are considered hazardous locations within 24 inches of a door, generally over a bathtub. And then one to be aware of is if you have more than 9 square foot of glass and it's less than 18 inches from the floor, that's generally considered a hazardous location that would need safety glass. And keep in mind, you can change windows when you replace windows. Doesn't mean since you have a double hung that you have to go back with a double hung. So you can, if you never open your windows and it's not a bedroom where you need egress, you may want to make it a fixed or a picture window. Or if you want to get rid of that meeting rail, in a window maybe above your kitchen sink because you can't reach over the sink and operate it, maybe a casement window with a crank handle would fit better in that scenario. So just remember that windows can be changed out. There's a lot of different styles out there. Some of our next episodes coming up, we're going to talk about installation of these windows, and we're also going to talk about glass. So keep in mind, all of these windows have glass options that can affect the energy efficiency of the window, can affect the security, UV fading, and sound reduction. And there's just different types of glass to be aware of, and we look forward to covering that in one of the next episodes.